Ljudje so že davno odkrili pozitivne dobre lastnosti jantarja.
As far as I know, there were two sources of jantar. I will use Slovak word, jantar, because it's meaningful to us. As far as I know, maybe you know more. One is Adriatic,
Torej dva izvora jantarja sta bila potem.
and one is the eastern Balt.
Eno je Jadran, drugo je pa vzhodni Baltik.
And the original is in India.
Izvorni, originalni jantar je pa v Indiji.
That's why we have a terminology connected with amber, Indian terminology. Both amber and yantar are Indian words.
Obe besedi, tako amber kot jantar, sta indijski besedi in zato izvornega beseda sama pa izvira iz Indije.
But both Indian amber or yantar and your yantar is inferior.
Ampak indijski jantar je slabše kakovosti in naš primer in comparison to Baltic.
Quality.
In comparison to Baltic.
In comparison to Baltic, yes.
Torej baltski jantar je dosti boljši tako od jadranskega kot od indijskega.
How would they know?
Kako bi pa oni to vedeli?
This implies that they were familiar with Central Europe.
To pomeni, da so bili seznanjeni s centralno Evropo.
They could have been attracted by gold,
Kamor so prišli
by tin
zaradi zlata.
and by copper.
Tin, pa bakar.
But it's interesting that I think if Slavic historians and generalists, they agree that amber is actually older. It can go to 4,000 years BC.
Ampak jantar greste 4000 let nazaj, pred našim štetjem.
And this implies, since the terminology is Indian, somehow Indians became aware of the fact that the good yantar is up there in the north.
Torej so Indijci že takrat verjetno vedeli, da je dober jantar najti tam nekje na severu.
And trade routes developed from Elbląg, from Basilia, which is now East Prussia, through Slovakia, down the Hornad River to the Danube, and down through Morava River and Vardar to the Aegean Sea.
Torej iz vzhodne Prusije preko Slovaške, Donave,
Vardar, Morava, Serbia,
do Egejskega morja.
And that trade was going on, and it made an impact on us. Do you know how we are called in those earliest times up there in Poland, through which those routes had to go?
Veste, kako so nas takrat klicali na Polskem, skozi katero morajo vse te poti?
We are called Hyperboreani.
Klicali so nas Hyperborejci.
And what is the meaning of Hyperboreani?
Kaj pomeni Hyperborejci?
Severno polarnega kroga.
You have it
north of polar circle.
No. Hyperborean means a porter. Porter. Who carries load of amber when trade caravan is going.
Nosači, naj bi pomenilo.
That was the meaning of Hyperborean. These are the people who used to go north and come back with the
ljudje, ki so hodili na sever in so nazaj nosili veliko jantarja.
And because they were traveling northwards, for this reason, many people got the impression that somehow they were northern people, somewhere from the polar circle or somewhere there.
So hodili na sever, so dobili občutek, da prihajajo od nekod iz severa.
Because when you read it in Greek or in Latin sources, you always get the impression, yes, it's connected with the north, and therefore, well, maybe they are from there. No, they used to go there and come back.
Če berete rimske ali pa grške vire, dobite občutek, ker so ga tudi oni imeli, da so to ljudje povezani z severom, z tem polarnim.
And that's, you see, this takes us to the time before the beginning of the third millennium BC.
In to nas pelje v čase 3. tisočletja pred našim štetjem.
And all along that way, when Hyperboreani were traveling there, they were praying to what God?
In ves čas, ko so ti Hyperborejci hodili tja, so častili katerega boga?
Venija.
Venija.
And they were Sloveni.
In zato so bili Sloveni.
No, and this is, I don't know what time, can I continue still? Are you still interested?
Še nadaljuje?
No, because there is so much, you know, yeah, I have to sort of choose where to go.
Tega je tako veliko, zato mora izbrati, kam bi šel.
And that's why, for instance, you know a saying, at least in Slovak, but you will understand.
Mogoče poznate izreko v slovaškem, jo poznam.
Vsi prešu, ale karavana musi ísť.
Ja, vsi lajajo, karavana gre dalje.
Čo to znamená?
Kaj to pomeni?
Čo to znamená? Why do we say it? Do we have caravans?
Ne, ali imamo karavane zdaj? Ne.
But we had.
Ampak imeli smo.
See, the caravans loaded with yankar from Hromnik, from Basilia. East Prussia was called Basilia. Why Basilia? Because then Basil is connected with the fire. And fire is in amber, in yankar.
Vzhodna Prusija je bila povezana z Basilijem, Basilij je ogenj, ogenj je pa skrit v jankarju.
And the
karavane polne jankarja so se valile.
Tie išli cez Polsko a oni museli ísť. Oni sa nemohli zastaviť, pretože keby prišli do... Oh, sorry. Because they had to cross the Danube, they had to get to the Aegean Sea, they had to get to the Nile, up the Nile, cross the Wadi Hamamat to the east, across the eastern desert, get to the top of the Red Sea in time for the ships to be able to sail out through Bab el-Mandeb. It's quite a mouthful.
We can start again.
Well, the caravan had to go, you see? The caravan had to go through, you can imagine, through Poland, through Slovakia, through and so on, to the Aegean Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. Then it had to...
Nila, pa preko Nila v Etiopijo, oziroma na vrh...
Not Ethiopia.
Ne, ampak
up the Nile to the point where Nile makes a big loop eastwards.
Ko naredi Nil veliki ovink na vzhod.
It's called Kena.
Kena.
Red place. Place of the red god.
Območje rdečega boga.
And red god is Shiva.
In rdeči bog je Shiva.
And if they cross the desert, 140 kilometers in time,
140 kilometrsko puščavo prečkajo pravočasno.
There were Dravidian ships waiting there.
So jih tam čakale dravidske ladje.
And if those ships didn't make it out by the end of July,
in če niso prišli do konca julija,
they got stuck.
So bili tam zatečeni.
Because then it is not possible to sail out.
So obtičali, ker ni možno izpluti.
That's why, even though in Poland and Slovakia the dogs were barking, but the caravan had to go.
Zato so tudi na Poljskem pa Slovaškem psi že lajali, ampak karavani so morali iti dalje.
You see, there was a regime. This implies knowledge of geography, knowledge of distances, knowledge of passable terrains, rivers and so on.
Poznali so geografijo, poznali so teren, razdalje, ker so morali vse to usklajevati.
We were not the inventors of it.
Mi nismo bili izumitelji tega.
We were participants.
Mi smo sodelovali pri tem.
Without us, Indians couldn't do it.
Indijci tega ne bi mogli narediti.
Indians couldn't bring Hyperboreani from India to go all the way there. It would be too costly. They could not bring Hyperboreani from India. Porters.
Aha, teh nosačev ne bi mogli pripeljati do Indije.
For this reason, Indian trade depended on the same worshippers of the same god.
Torej, njihova trgovina bila odvisna od častilcev istega boga, torej Slovenov.
Worshippers of the long-haired god.
Častilcev dolgolasega boga.
And this way, we are connected with the Dravida Indians, but we shouldn't think we are the instrumental. That we are originators. We are not the originators. India is the originator.
Torej, Indija je izvorna, mi nismo bili izvorni, ampak smo pri tem sodelovali.
But without us, they couldn't do it either.
Brez nas pa tega tudi ne bi mogli narediti.
And that's where our history begins.
In tam se začne naša zgodovina.
For this reason, don't imagine our people that they were 3,000 years before Christ, that they were in bear skins, eating raw meat and so on. No, they were participating in the international trade.
Zato si ne predstavljate, da so bili 3000 let nazaj pred našim štetjem v medvedjih kožuhih, pa jedli surovo meso, ampak so sodelovali v mednarodni trgovini.
You see, the old civilization of India, which is the oldest, and this is contested. Many people will say, no, Sumer is older. but brute.
Torej, ta stara indijska civilizacija, ki se smatra za najstarejšo, pa so tudi to že poskušali vreči, pa so rekli, da je sumerska starejša, ampak dokažite.
What is the symbol of civilization?
Kaj je simbol civilizacije?
A city.
Mesto.
If you don't have cities, you don't have very high culture.
Če nimate mesta, nimate neke visoke kulture.
You have to have a city, and that city is called.
In morate imeti mesto, in kako se to mesto imenuje?
If you are a dweller in a city, what are you?
Kako ste, če živite v mestu, kaj ste?
Meščani.
No, še drugače v tujki.
You are an urbanite.
Ste urbani.
Ur.
And
Ur is the first city mentioned in the Bible.
In Ur je prvo mesto imenovano v Bibliji.
There was the birthplace of Abraham.
Abraham je bil rojen v
He was
Uru.
born there. And his father was what's the name?
Njegov oče, Abrahamov oče. Nismo.
Tera.
Tela?
Tera. Tera.
Tera je bil njegov oče.
One has to think about so many different names in different languages. His father was Tera. And his profession, Jews do not emphasize very much in the Bible.
In Židje ne poudarjajo njegovega poklica od Tera.
Because Tera was his professional name.
Ker je bilo Tera dejansko njegovo profesionalno ime.
Because he was a terapin. He was a seller of terapin. And terapin are godlings.
Bil je prodajalec terapimov, and terapins are
Little godlings. Godlings, figures of God.
Maliki.
Ja.
Figurice.
Figurice.
No.
Božji.
Podobe božanstva,
Ja.
tako.
You see, and that's why he is Tera, and those božiks that he was selling were called terapin. That's in the Bible.
Terapimi so se imenovali.
And when Abraham was born in Ur.
In Abraham je bil rojen v Uru.
But Ur is a Dravida word for city.
Ampak Ur je dravidsko ime za mesto.
Prominent professor of Slovakia, Professor Kučera, wrote an article 2 years ago that we, Sloveni, coming from the Pripyatske swamps, we were the builders of the Middle Age European cities.
Torej, profesor Kučera, slovaški, je pred 2 leti napisal čudovito tezo, da so prišli Slovaki iz Pripyatskih močirij in zgradili v srednji Evropi v srednjem veku čudovita mesta.
And I responded to it, and I said we must have been Zablatins. We came from the mud.
In mu je odgovoril, da so bili verjetno Zablatenci, da so prišli iz blata.
But finally, Professor Kučera, after 8 years of being a professor, he actually said in his article that Slovan means man of mud.
In je on dokazal na svoj znanstven način, da pomeni beseda Slovan človek, ki je prišel iz blata.
So we are muddy people.
Zato smo blatni ljudje.
See, and if we throw mud into our eyes,
In če se vršemo blato v oči lastne,
we will never see.
ne bomo nikoli videli svojih korenin.
We have to wash our eyes in the pure water
Svoje oči si moramo očistiti z čisto vodo, svežo vodo.
and open our eyes to the distant past,
In usmeriti oči na daljno preteklost.
and we discover that we are probably, not probably, very highly probably, the oldest identifiable group of people in Europe.
In bomo odkrili, da smo verjetno, zelo verjetno, najstarejša skupina, ki se jo da identificirati v celotni Evropi.
Please don't make of us builders of the European civilization.
Prosimo, ne delajte iz nas gradnikov evropske civilizacije.
The European civilization formed itself much later than we came into existence.
Evropska civilizacija se je zgradila dosti kasneje, kot smo mi bili obstajali.
And there were other people who became cleverer than us,
In drugi so postali pametnejši od nas,
like the Greeks and Romans,
kot Grki pa Rimljani.
and we must give them the credit where credit belongs.
In moramo jim dati priznanje, ki jim gre.
We opened Europe, certainly, as Hyperboreans.
Odprli smo Evropo, zagotovo, kot Hiperborejci.
And we participated for the longest time in the makeup of European history.
Smo pač najdaljši čas sodelovali pri ustvarjanju
But we
evropske
didn't
zgodovine.
build a middle-age European
Nismo pa zgradili srednjeveških evropskih mest.
Why didn't we?
Zakaj nismo?
Because we ourselves lost our territory, we lost almost our identity when Hungarians separated you from us.
Ker smo izgubili območja, izgubili smo spomin, pa recimo Mađari so nas razdelili.
And that's the Middle Age.
In to je srednji vek.
And so let's see all our history in proportion.
Poglejmo vso svojo zgodovino v razmerjih, relativno.
So far I spoke about our origin springing up from the trade.
Govoril sem o našem izvoru, ki prihaja iz trgovine.
But actually more important than trade was
Ampak pomembnejše od trgovine,
what came with it.
kaj je prišlo s trgovino.
It was the religion.
Bila je religija.
Because we became Sloveni.
Ker smo
Veletnici vlasatega Boga.
Sloveni, častilci vlasatega Boga.
And we happened to be living in the mountain area surrounded by the Carpathians, Dinares or Dinarides and the Alps.
Živeli smo na območju okroženem z gorami, Karpati, Dinaridi pa Alpami.
And the situation, particularly of Slovakia, north of the Danube, resembles that of North India.
In recimo območje Slovaške, ki je severno od severno od Donave, spominja na področje severne Indije.
You see, Indians from the very beginning, from the ancient Dravidian times, believed that God is beyond.
Torej, Indijci so ves čas od Dravidov naprej dalje verjeli, da je Bog daleč onkraj.
In that beyond, there must be a divide. What is on this side and what is beyond.
In mora obstajati neka meja med tistim, kar je onkraj in med tem, kar je tu.
In geographical terms in India it was obvious. What is on this side and what is beyond.
V zemljepisnih razmerah Indije je bilo popolnoma jasno, kaj je tu, pa kaj je onkraj.
That's the Himalayas.
To so pogorje Himalaje.
Himalayas. What divides Europe into northern and southern and Tatra mountains?
In Evropo delijo Tatre, gore Tatre, gorovje delijo na enak način.
And this was recognized by those Hyperboreans, by those Dravida traders who were crossing the Tatra mountains somewhere in Zakopane or in Orava or in north of Morava.
In na enak način so to ugotovili tudi te Hyperborejci, ki so
eventually
čez Tatre.
Tatri became a European Himalaya.
In so Tatre postale evropska Himalaja.
Where people wanted to come to die.
Kamor so ljudje hoteli priti umreti.
You see, in India, for a long time, until quite recent time, even today, there are people who want to die in the north under Mount Kailasam.
Torej, v Indiji si veliko ljudi želi umreti na severu, pri gori Kailash, Sveta gora.
In 1960s, 64 or so, there was an article in London Times saying disaster has been discovered in India because there was a particularly warm summer and the glacier melted in the Himalayas.
In angliški članek iz leta 1964 je rekel, da so odkrili nezaslišano katastrofo, ko se je nek ledenik stalil preveč poleti.
And when it melted, they found there about over 200 bodies.
In so našli več kot 200 trupel.
And the London Times reported disaster of ancient times has been uncovered.
In londonski Times je objavil, da so odkrili katastrofo iz zgodovine.
And Hindustani Times wrote happiest people were discovered.
In Hindustani Times je napisal, odkrili so najsrečnejše ljudi.
Because on the way to God they died.
Ker so umrli na poti k Bogu.
This is sort of a background that we have to bear in mind. We live in a very materialistic world. When we look at our bank as the temple.
To je ozadje, ki ga moramo upoštevati, kajti mi živimo v zelo materialnem svetu. in gledamo na naše banke kot naše templje.
In ancient times, Sloveni time and Indian time, life was but a journey from birth to God.
V času Slovenov, Indijcev, v tistem času, ki smo ga prej opisovali, je bilo življenje pot od rojstva k Bogu.
And for this reason, because Indians realize that man is feeble, weak, and needs help to make the journey from the south of existence, human existence, to beyond the mountains to the eternal existence.
Zato so Indijci vedeli, da je človek šibak in mu je potrebno pomagati, da gre od rojstva od juga do Boga preko.
For this reason, an institution called temple was invented.
Zato so bili ustanovljeni templji.
Templi help people to find their way north.
In ti so jim pomagali najti pot proti severu.
And in Slovakia you go and you get a detailed map of Tatra mountain, for instance, you will see there are many places called palenišče.
In v Tatrah, če boste pogledali zemljevide, imate ogromno krajev, ki se imenujejo palenišče.
You understand palenišče?
Razumete to besedo?
Where people used to be burned.
Tam, kjer so ljudi upepelili, kremirali.
Yes, because India from ancient time was cremating and we were cremating until about the 5th century BC.
Do 5. stoletja pred našim štetjem smo tudi mi kremirali, pa Indija je vaš čas in...
Sorry?
Ja, vprašanje.
Vprašanje, no.
Pozdeje, lahko pozdeje?
Ja, lahko. Sem mislil, da boste počali 12.
We must leave some time for questions.
Redo, ja,
Do we have?
je predvideno, ne?
Dobro.
No.
Palenišče, ja?
Palenišče, yes. You see, speech, if you open this book, it sort of gives the significance of the region below the high Tatras.
Če odprete to knjigo, vam pokaže pomen tega območja pod visokimi Tatrami.
You see, the land is called Slovenikam. I will explain still Slovenikam.
Ozemlje se imenuje Slovenikam, torej država.
So, this ko in slovensko.
To slovensko.
That's just the Slovak rendering of the Dravida kam.
To je ta ko, končnica, je v bistvu dravidska končnica kam. Samo spremenjena.
And Slovenikam on the north has the high Tatras.
Slovenikam ima torej na severu visoke Tatre.
And here is the watershed.
Tu je vodna linija.
And that's called Štrba.
Štrba.
And you will find Štrba, Tatranska Štrba, Štrbske pleso, Štrbski štit. You see, Štrb. This is an Indian word for a divide.
Za mejo je to imenovanje Štrb.
And the river that goes this way is called Poprat.
Reka, ki gre v tisto smer, se imenuje Poprat.
Which means way to heaven.
V smer proti nebesom.
And here flows the river called Va.
In ta reka gre, se imenuje Va.
Which means way to wisdom and truth.
Pot k modrosti in resnici.
And Indians, because they had lots of time to think, and they created 1008 names for different images of God.
Ki so imeli dosti časa in so na ta način izumili oziroma iznašli in imenovali 1008 imen za Boga.
They had to bring some order into this.
So morali prinesti nek red vse to.
So they divided the space around us, around each of us, around India and so on, around Slovakia, into 4 quarters.
Zato so razdelili območje na 4 dele.
4 directions and 8 quarters, that's what I want to say.
4 smeri in 8 kotov.
So you have northern quarter, northeastern quarter, eastern quarter, southeastern quarter, southern quarter, southwestern quarter, you see? And each quarter contains some of those 1008 quarters. There is residence in this particular direction, and if you want to pray for something specific, you discover the God who takes care of it. And then you pray that way.
1008 in each quarter?
No. 1008
divided. 4 kvadranti in vseh teh 8 smeri je vsod se najde, razdeli se na 1008 imen.
And I have no time for all them, so I will bring in only which is very meaningful for us, is the northwestern quarter,
Severno-zahodni kvadrant,
where flows the river Var.
Kjer teče reka Var.
Var, and Var means slow, the word.
Var pomeni beseda?
It is the sorry. Var and var, I mean, and slovo. Without slovo, you wouldn't know the wisdom.
Brez besede pa ne bi poznali znanja, modrosti.
You may be clever, very wise man, but if you don't know to say, you are not.
Lahko ste zelo pametni, ampak če tega ne znate povedati.
For this reason, you need the word var, which is the language, the slovo.
Zato je ta beseda vah,
And
beseda.
the goddess who gives wisdom
In boginja, ki daje modrost,
in India today is called Saraswati.
se v Indiji danes imenuje Sarasvati.
Saras means the essence,
Saras pomeni bistvo,
which is the truth.
ki je
If
resnica.
you know the essence of anything, you know the truth.
Če poznate bistvo česarkoli, poznate tudi resnico o tem.
And Vati means a residence.
In vati pomeni domovanje.
Therefore, Saraswati is the residence or home of
Torej Sarasvati, domovanje
the truth.
resnice.
But this is a Sanskrit.
Ampak to je sanskritska beseda.
So that term did not exist prior to about 1400 BC.
Torej pred 1600 leti pred našim štetjem te besede ni bilo.
And we don't know that kind of a goddess.
In take boginje ne poznamo.
We know number of the names of these 1008, but we do not know Saraswati.
Poznamo številne od teh, oziroma we know all,
No, we know
vseh,
some.
ampak med teh, ki jih poznamo od 1008, pa ni Sarasvati.
And since we don't know Saraswati, therefore it would mean that we are not very clever.
In ker je ne poznamo, bi to pomenilo, da nismo zelo pametni.
Fortunately, we must be aware of the time. There was a time before 1500 BC
Zato na srečo se lahko zavedamo časa pred 1500.
when India didn't speak Sanskritic languages but Dravidian
Ko
languages.
je Indija govorila dravidske jezike, ne sanskrit.
And in Dravidske jaziki, in Dravidian languages, the wisdom, the truth is called
In v dravidskih jezikih
No, sorry, Uma.
v dravidskih jezikih se modrost imenuje Uma.
Goddess of wisdom, of the truth, is Uma.
Boginja modrosti, resnice je Uma.
And what do we have here?
In kaj imamo tu?
No. This is just one example of 1008 options how you can look at the idea of God. There is only one God. But Indians had so much time to elaborate that every aspect of life can be understood in terms of one image, like Saraswati, Uma, Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, and so on. I can go on.
Torej, aspekti življenja jih je možno, kot so Indijci, ki so imeli dosti časa in modrosti, so iznašli teh 1008 pogledov na Boga.
So you see, if you look in Slovakia, the northwestern quadrant, in terms of Sanskritic languages, then we do not have any connection with the goddess of wisdom of truth.
Torej, če pogledate preko Sanskrta v ta severno-vzhodni kvadrant, ne boste našli nobene.
Then we have to go to the pre-1500 BC time, and then suddenly we have the goddess of wisdom and truth, Uma, and we still have it in our heads.
In potem najdete boginjo, ki jo imamo še zdaj v vlastni glavi.
No, and this way we could go through many aspects of our life, and you would see that things that we do not understand, some of them we can interpret in terms of Sanskritic languages, so-called Indo-European connection, but that Indo-European connection is not sufficient to bring us to our roots. To go to the roots, we have to go to the Dravidian period.
Torej, da bi prišli do vlastnih korenin, se ne moramo zanašati samo na Sanskrt, ampak se moramo obvezno še uplesti dravidske jezike.
And this brings us to the name of our country.
To nas pripelje do ime na naše dežele.
There are tutors, are teachers in ancient times, in the 3rd millennium BC,
ki so ga naši učitelji v 3. tisočletju pred našim štetjem,
they live in Tamilakam,
ki so živeli v Tamilakamu,
and we live in Slovenika.
in mi živimo v Slovenikamu.
See, that's where our call comes in Slovenika, from that book. This is the first time it appeared in Slovakia.
To je prvič, ko so se
I gave a lecture last year in Spiška Nova Ves,
v spisku Univerzi je prvič imel predavanje.
And there happened to be a sculptor in the audience.